Live from my Lakeview studio in the Windy City. Welcome to Chicago Python Tonight. My name is Ali Sivji. I'm one of the organizers of Chicago Python. I'm going to be your host for this evening's event. Let's get started. Before I do start, I want to make everybody aware of our code of conduct. There's more information on our website. Can't really do it too much justice by summarizing it, but the main gist is treat people kindly and the way you would like to be treated. What is ChiPy? ChiPy, or the Chicago Python Users Group, is a Python-focused community that was started back in 2003. We've grown from humble beginnings to become one of the largest Python communities in the world. We have 6,000 members, and every month we usually have 3 to 5 events. On top of our Dunder main meeting, which is this one, we have special interest groups that focus in on more niche application areas of Python. Since Chicago is one of the world's finance hubs, we have a lot of folks doing Python for finance at hedge funds, trading shops. We also have a special interest group devoted to that. A lot of folks use Python for data science, data engineering, machine learning. There's a special interest group for that as well. We also have a SIG for web dev / DevOps, and there's a SIG for algorithms and data structures to help you figure out how to be better at those leet code, hacker rank coding interview type questions. What's going on in the world? Do you want to give a shout out to the ChiPy Web Guild, specifically Sofan Min? She's been working a lot on this feature. We just released it. It's our job board. So if you go to chipy.org/job-board, you can find out what opportunities are available from our sponsors as well as our wider Python community. We've also been hard at work revamping our mentorship program. We've transitioned from our old style program to more of a self-directed buddy mentorship type approach. If you go to chipymentor.org, you can find out more about that. I don't know if anybody heard, but Python 3.90 release candidate 1 is now available. This is going to be apparently the penultimate release preview. Check it out. Make sure if you're a library maintainer that it's working, if you're planning on supporting 3.9. What's happening in terms of features? If you've been following along Guido van Rossem's blog, he's been talking about a new kind of parser. So they're going to be implementing a new peg parser. There's a lot more information in his blog post. Really recommend you go check it out. It's a really interesting read. They're also going to be making Python into, they're going to be having an annual release cycle for Python. So every 12 months, starting with 3.9, we're going to get a new version of Python. We were talking about this before we came on the broadcast. They're going to be adding the union operator to dictionaries. I'm really looking forward to this one. This is actually something I'm going to be using more or less at least once a week. There is also support for time zone databases in the standard library. There's a new module that's going to be there called Zone Info. If anybody's actually interested in this, we can reach out to the person that wrote this PEP and get him to come on to talk about what he did. ChiPy does have a new sponsor. I'm going to be bringing on Ari Waller. He is our sponsor from JFrog. Ari, can you please introduce JFrog to our community?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ali. Hi, everyone. My name is Ari Waller, and I am the Meetup event manager for JFrog, and we are really excited to be a new sponsor for ChiPy. Thank you so much for welcoming us into your community. It looks like it's very active and engaging, and we're just so excited to be here. For those of you who don't know JFrog is a software company. We're based in the Silicon Valley. We are known by many for our flagship product. If you haven't heard of JFrog, our product Artifactory is well known throughout the world as really the world's oldest and leading binary repository. We have 600 employees and 10 offices globally, and more than 3 million developers use our software tools daily because we're really well known for in the DevOps world with Artifactory. Python, as you can imagine, is a really key and important skill set in the DevOps world. So again, we're really, really excited to be here and part of everything going on. I know you are enjoying some awesome talks this evening, but in addition, we want to spread, I guess, some additional quarantine cheer with everybody with our August monthly sweepstakes. You see the QR code on the screen. And at the end of August, JFrog is going to be drawing a winner for a Nintendo Switch with BioShock and Paper Mario. So you have something for the kids and something for yourself if you want to play. And we're going to be doing this from all the meetups we're part of throughout the month. Now, this month also, nobody actually gets to go home a loser, because if you enter the sweepstakes, either through the bit.ly link or the QR code, you will get a JFrog t-shirt. Now, I'll tell you, JFrog is really well known for their t-shirts. I've actually learned about the company just because of their t-shirts and their t-shirts alone. So this year's t-shirt is called Iron Frog. So I would love to send you one. So all you have to do is enter to win a Nintendo Switch, and you'll get contacted so we can send you a t-shirt as well. But anyway, I'm going to put that link inside the chat box. But I just want to say thank you again. We're very, very excited to be here and part of the ChiPy community.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ari. But I don't know, like, you're letting your kids play BioShock? That might be a little bit too much.
No, I don't know. I don't think, I mean, Paper Mario Origami, I think, is the, they're new releases. I'm going to try to get a hold of, there's another one called, I think it's like a crab version of Street Fighter that comes out next month. I forgot what it's called, but we're going to try to get those up as prizes too. We try to stay with the latest and greatest with the fun stuff too.
Awesome. Yeah. And Switch is so hard to find. So yeah, definitely great that somebody can enter for a chance to win.
Absolutely. I was actually very lucky. My wife, I actually went into a Walmart and they happened to actually have a couple there. They would only sell me one. So it was up to my wife to go in and buy a second one, so I'd have them for the sweepstakes for the last couple months. So it's definitely hard to find for sure. So excited to give them away.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on and being a sponsor, and for introducing yourself and JFrog to our ChiPy community.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it, Ali.
All right. We'll see you later.
Take care.
All right, so where can you find and connect with Chicago Python? You can check out our Slack workspace. We have around 2,000 members. I think the last count was 1,955 or 56. Check out that link, send yourself an invite, and join in on the conversation. I also really recommend the Pets of ChiPy channel. A lot of great pets in our community. We are also on Twitter. Check out @ChicagoPython. And our website, which has a lot of information, is chipy.org. I do want to talk about some of our upcoming events. By popular demand, our Python lunch break is back. So join us on Thursday, August 27th at 12 Central. We're going to have Reuven Lerner on, and Reuven's given talks at a lot of conferences. He digs deep into things like functions, decorators. I saw him speak at EuroPython and PyCon Africa. Really excited to have him on in a couple weeks. September 3rd is going to be our next AlgoSig event. September 10th is going to be our next main meeting. We have a fantastic talk featuring a self-driving RC car. And then our next DataSig is going to be on Wednesday, September 16th. We are looking for speakers for some of these events. So if you're interested, please reach out. There's more information on our website. But that's enough about later on. You're here for our fantastic event tonight. We got 3 great speakers. I'm really excited. We always say this is going to be the best meeting ever, but like, this is going to be our best meeting ever. First up, it's going to be Piper Thunstrom talking about how PursuedPyBear decides what's important, principles-driven development. I like that, PDD. Next up, we have ChiPy community member Sree Prasad talking about the California Consumer Privacy Act. It's a lot of things coming on in the world of data privacy. I know it's not Python, but definitely good for us to know about, especially for those of us who work in the web space. And finally, we have Nina Zakharenko, who's one of my favorite speakers in the Python community. She's going to be giving an encore of her PyCon talk called Hello Print, Goodbye Print, Hello Debugger. You've probably already seen our chat window on the side. Please use that to send in questions for our speakers. Be aware there's going to be a 10 to 20-second delay. So if you do have questions, get them in before the talk's over so we can get them answered. All right, that's enough about ChiPy, enough about me. Let's get Piper on the stream. Hey, Piper, how's it going?
It's been a long day.
Has it? Okay, well, hopefully ChiPy's going to re-energize you. Can you tell us where we're calling in from?
I'm actually Newark, New Jersey, so just outside of New York City.
Awesome. Another member of the Python New York community speaking at ChiPy. Happy to have you. Can you introduce yourself to Chicago Python?
Sure. What most people will know me for is I've done some community organization in the New York space. So I'm an organizer of NYC Python, NYC Flask. I've done a bunch of talks at PyGotham, so anyone who pays attention to those may have seen me. I also am the maintainer of PursuedPyBear and a couple of other game-related libraries in Python.
Awesome. So you do a lot of things in Python, but how did you originally get into it?
Mostly by accident is the way that story goes. I went to school for management information systems. I was interested in like a business analyst career. And after I graduated, basically couldn't get a job and was like, well, they all kind of want more technical focus. So I guess I will go and like learn how to program, go online, go, hey, what should I start with? And everyone at the time was going Python. Python is the thing to start with. And so I picked up a couple of books, one of which was one of Al Spieger's old books, and started there. So like my first program I started learning Python December 2012. I had finished my first video game February of the next year.
Nice. So what was the Al Swigert book?
It's the Inventing Games with Python and Pygame.
Yeah, that is a fantastic book. Like Al's has so much material that I think a lot of people are introduced to Python that way. Like I'm always recommend automating the boring stuff. I definitely use it as a reference. To change gears a little bit, like we've all been dealing with the effects of COVID-19 and sheltering in place. I'm not too sure exactly how things are in New York, New Jersey area, but in Chicago, like restaurants have opened up. There is like social distancing, patios are opening up. So people are being able to go out, see their friends, but it's still not quite the same. Like we're going to be meeting virtually for like probably like the next like 6 months to a year, I'd imagine. Can you talk a little bit about like how you're dealing with the effects of COVID-19 and sheltering in place?
Well, I actually have like one of those hard stories. About 1 week before New York City went into lockdown, my doctor called me and basically said, you cannot catch this. So I've been extra cautious. I have joked, I have left my apartment building one time in the last 4 months. So I'm a little stir crazy at this point. But it's more like keeping myself safe. But yeah, it's frustrating because things keep coming and going. Like I have to like plan to be sheltered a lot longer than everyone else. And so I'm kind of hoping that everyone gets their act together so we can get to a safe spot faster.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, let's all be safe and like let's not chance it. Wear masks when you can, definitely. Are you ready to start your talk?
As I'm gonna be, I think.
Okay. All right. Let me get your screen on. Piper, please take it away.
All right. So I am talking about a thing. So principles-driven development is an idea that I've slowly been growing. So this is kind of what I think about it right now. I am definitely open to questions about like the idea and what it means. But for the most part, principles are what has driven PPB since its early days as a community project. So we will get into this. We've already talked about who I am, but I'm a senior software engineer at Zapari. I'm also a community organizer, as I discussed, and I'm a game developer, which should be unsurprising considering I run a game development library. You can find my stuff at pathunstrom.itch.io. If you go over there, All of the games on my itch profile have been written in Python, specifically using PPB. So that's kind of cool. You can also reach me via Gmail here, PA Thunstrom on Twitter. And this talk is available on GitHub if you want to see that. We did mention my open source libraries. The big ones are here, PursuedPyBear, which we'll be talking about further, and Misbehave, which is a Pythonic behavior tree implementation. Specifically for my own use, it is less aimed at education. All right, so let's get into this talk. So I'm basically going to go over a short history of PPB, mostly from the day I started it to the time it became a community project. Some of the problems we encountered going from a solo project to a community project, and the entire system of embracing principles as guides for decision making. So when I talk about this, PursuedPyBear was actually the first project I open sourced, which means that I have made a lot of mistakes in its history, and that's kind of why I want to talk about this. As I said, started as a personal project. It was, in fact, a PyWeek project that inspired all of this. The PyWeek project was not the framework. It was an actual game, but I was building an MVC framework during PyWeek to generate it. 0.1 was basically taking the good ideas out of that PyWeek project and building it into basically trying to solve the Pygame boilerplate problem. For anyone who's done a lot of Pygame references, they will have experienced that at some point. 0.2.0 was the first publicly available version. This was a pretty pure MVC framework. You had publishers, subscribers, views, controllers. It was all there. And as I started talking about that version, a lot of my friends are educators. And so I got a lot of questions about, like, could you, like, make this to be the thing to use in a classroom? It took me a couple of months to, like, come to the decision that that was the thing I should do. Once I did, that meant I had to start focusing on, like, okay, how easy is this? Unfortunately, I learned that it was bad. The original version of PPB, after about 6 months of working on it, I ended up not being able to put a game together in my own framework. So the first API was terrible. Version 0.3 was the birth of modern PPB, is how I put it. It was a complete redesign. I'd worked on it outside the project repository for a little while and had to decide what it looked like. I did a lot of research into Pythonic APIs during that time. Raymond Hedder's famous talk was a big inspiration for solving some of my problems. And basically, there is one commit where the old version of PPB was all deleted, and this new version got dropped into its place. And that was the version 0.3. By that point, I had actually managed to get a job using PPB as a tool for solving an interview problem. Not PPB itself, but this new engine that became PPB. Other things that I was learning during this time, figuring out who my audience was as an engineer, as a project, was actually kind of hard. You learn that, like, how you ask your users what it is they're looking for has a lot of effect on what information they give you. So I had to learn how to, like, do user research pretty much on my own. And then the other thing that really was bothering me as it was a solo project that I'm trying to build for other people is, how do I even get a code review? I solved this mostly at the time by, like, going into my game development communities, going into my other Python communities, and just asking. Surprisingly, if you just ask for help, Python's one of those communities where that sometimes just works. The other thing is I started asking teachers. I would ask my teaching friends, like, hey, this is the API I'm working on. I've got like 3 versions that might work. Can you tell me, like, give me reasons why one or more is the right way to go or the wrong way to go? So not long after that, I was solving the problem of our event system. And I didn't actually have the skills to build our event queue. Like, I had a version and it was bad. But I actually had a friend who has done event queues before. So we started talking together. And we sat down at a PyCon a handful of years ago and like knocked out this we knocked out the event queue problem. We built the first version of the API. We have mostly settled on that. We've changed the interior a bit, but like that is the same design that it was that day. And this friend, Jamie, became my first regular contributor. Instead of just having a one-off contribution from a handful of people, she was really the first person to work with me long term. She also had some opinions about my toolchain. I had not automated very much of PPB at this point. So one day when she wanted to set up our CI/CD tooling, that's when she got the maintainer bit. And so that's where we went from a solo-ish project to a real community project. The title of this slide is the BDFL problem, and I should probably step aside to talk about that for a second. I have an issue where I have this issue that I know that PPB is one of those things that a lot of open source projects, if the person who authored them leaves the project, they tend to die. And I know by this point, I knew that I did not want that to be PPB. Which is why finding a co-maintainer was such an important step in the process. I needed to not be the only one. So with all of that in place, we have this next question. What do we work on next? I mean, we've got a solid product. I'm really proud of PPB at this point. We actually started building a team. But now we had to work towards that goal of getting into classrooms, getting the API right. And so let's talk about like, how do you pick those things? In the case of PPB, we have a fairly complex audience. Our teachers were the original people that I was building this for, but we realized during the last handful of years that like, really we needed to be focusing on the learner use case. It's helpful if they have a teacher to go with them, but if they're learning Python, they're actually our primary user group. And then of course the teachers who are teaching them are one of our audience groups. And then finally, there's the thought of if a student learns in PPB, eventually they're going to not be a student anymore. And I mean, I learned how to program on Pygame. I still write games. So at some point, they're going to graduate from being students to probably being hobbyists. So we knew that we had to support the needs of the hobbyist users. People who do game development for fun, for their own, or even professionally in the case of a few of them. And what you'll notice with this broad audience, there's a lot of conflicting access needs here. Hobbyists really, really want their stuff to be flexible. They want to be able to change things as they want. Students need the shallow learning curve, giving them the easy on-ramp into coding. And teachers have it even more complex because you have technical teachers who are very comfortable with things like Python. And then you'll have non-technical teachers that are trying to teach software engineering or computer science. And you have to be able to catch them too. So this is a complicated space to work in. Other things that we were seeing is that explaining the why we did a thing. started a number of arguments in our Discord channel. We'd have to explain why we as the engineers on PPB could not take the easy way out. And then we also want to be able to express like what the priorities are and why we decided on them. And in a very personal, among the maintainers, sometimes picking our next priority was a difficulty because we just didn't really know the shape of the next problem. All right, so we started developing what I call a principled stance. This actually started early on. I wrote down some aspirational things, things that I wanted PPB to be. Those existed in the README. They're still there, but they actually weren't great. They were kind of informal. They weren't actionable. In general, they weren't a great set of principles for what we are. Over time, as the team gelled, we started discussing like what needed to go into PPB, and we started developing this set of ideas that we would go back to as our reasoning. So our learner focus was one of the big ones. But even while doing this, we would often like forget some of these because we didn't write them down. We didn't actually have them formalized anywhere. And so between those kinds of problems and the need to communicate these ideals to our user base, to our development base, and to our community, that's when we started realizing we needed to write these down. So this is the process we went through to figure out what these problems were, or what these principles were. The first thing we did was started collecting ideas. This was mostly on me. It was informal. I kept a document of the things that were going to go into our principles documentation. And I would be asking various questions like, what is important to us as a project? Who is it important to? That was one of the ones that the complexity of our audience base actually demanded that we actually think about that. And the one thing that I really have discovered is important when you start doing this work is make sure that these ideas are actionable in some way. So we start developing this list. We get a big list. And then we sat down and had a more formal discussion, actually moderated discussion where everyone could have their say. And we dug into how each of these principles affects us as a community. Like when we say students and learners first, what does that actually mean for PPB as a community? It also, how does it affect us as a dev team? Because the team itself are the ones keeping PPB alive. This is things like we actually encoded things like the least surprise principle into our things, and the fact that like our APIs should be fun to play with, which means that we will often be using our own library to find like, hey, doing this one thing is kind of terrible and it's not fun to do. We need to like go back and look at that API again. And lastly, it's really helpful to like think about these ideals as they apply to you as an individual. After that, it's time to write them down. This was all me. This was not really the community piece. It was, I had to sit down and I had to look at the principles we'd found, write an outline, figure out what's related to what so that we could put them together in the documentation in a way that made sense. And then we wrote them out. As I said, we put them in the documentation. I really suggest like keep your culture documentation in the documentation for your project. They're a living document. They're going to change. The principles on PPB have changed multiple times. The architecture on PPB has changed multiple times and kind of in unison. And cite them. Actually refer to your principles documentation when you're like, if you have to turn down a PR because it's not good for your project, like explain that. Explain why it's not okay. The really important part is that if you want your project to be principled, you've got to live them. If you don't, the documentation's basically wasted effort. All right, so let's go through this. Quick takeaways. Know why you're building the thing. You need to know what it is you're building and why you're building it. Determine what matters for why you're building it. And then write them down. Talk about your principles with your team. Treat your documentation as a living document. We'll have to continue repeating that. And then reference them when you're having conversations about your future. Like, know what it is that matters and why, and share that with everyone else. With this, so I'm going to be done in a couple of minutes, so it might be time to ask questions. If you want to reach out to me, again, pathunstrom@gmail.com. Twitter is @pathunstrom. Or you can join the project. There's a Discord link on our website at ppb.dev. And you can follow the PursuedPyBear Twitter @PursuedPyBear. So questions is where we are now.
Awesome. That was so great. Can we give Piper a round of applause in the chat? I normally copy and paste emojis, but I was not prepared right now. I do have a question before other people start rolling in. You were making things like better for you. Like, is there something that you thought was better for you, but it's like a feature that has not been used that you thought would be?
I mean, back in the original days, yeah, there was a lot of that. Since then, it's hard to say because I know I've there's APIs that I wrote that I okayed the cutting that out and replacing it with something else. So yeah, that absolutely happens. I can't give you a specific instance of doing that though. I don't remember one.
So you did learn a lot. Like, as a maintainer, is there something that you took from this project that you applied to Misbehave?
So Misbehave is still in the solo dev mode. I'm still doing the thing. I have taken certain things. I set up the CI/CD for Misbehave. It has had it since day one. Actually, I learned GitHub Actions to do it, so that tooling is actually pretty cool. The other thing with Misbehave is learning to interact between multiple libraries at once, because Misbehave actually started. I wrote an implementation into a video game, and then I actually went looking. There's not a behavior tree library anywhere in Python that I can find. And so I'm like, okay, what if I turn this into a library? And then as I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, so I built this as this class-based thing with an entry point, and it was kind of not fun. I'm like, why am I not writing these as functions? And so I had to redesign the whole library as I was working on it. Ended up breaking my game as I went over to Misbehave from the vendored version. I broke it 6 or 7 times. It took me a handful of weeks to get it back to feature parity. But now it's actually really fun because Misbehave, if you don't need state in your behaviors, you literally can just write a function and pass it as it's a behavior, which is just a really cool way to think about behavior trees.
Yeah. We're going to have to get you back to dig a little bit deeper into this because I'm sort of fascinated how some of this works. Before we do let you go, can you talk a little bit about how somebody can get started developing a game in PPB, or what's the best resources to learn, or just learn game programming in general?
So I've got a handful of talks out there. If you search my name, there is my PyTexas talk that everybody loves. For the folks who didn't attend my talk, I live coded for 30 minutes and had nothing go wrong. So that was fun.
It was impressive. I was there to watch it live, and I'm still in awe.
I am actually currently working on a build a Pong clone tutorial for PPB. But outside of that, for the most part, you see all of the pieces to make a simple game in the 15-line README. That if you just go to the website, there is a demo, or in the README of the project that is all you need to get started. To do more advanced things, we need to work on tutorials and things. Also, Alswiggert's early books are, of course, great. That's mostly going to teach you the Pygame side of things. PPB is not Pygame based anymore. But I think that I think answers the question enough.
Yeah. Also, so I didn't know PPB is not Pygame based anymore. So when did that change come about?
I want to say 0.7. It was either 0.7 or 0.8. Basically, the issue is Pygame is currently working on getting Pygame 2.0 out. I'm kind of excited about seeing how that changes that library, but so they decided back when 3.8 came out, we discovered that they were not going to put out another Pygame release, and because 3.8 changed the C extensions API, Pygame broke in 3.8. There was not a wheel available for Python 3.8, which unfortunately locked us. We actually got stuck for a version or two. We had to like pin our Python version and couldn't support 3.8. But because PPB as a whole wants to like always be supporting the latest Python version, we had to make a decision. And so we switched over to PySDL2, which has been really great for Windows and Mac users. It's still a little painful for Linux users, but it is better than it was, at least as far as our install story and using PPB is concerned. It doesn't change much under the hood for like, we're still using SDL. We're just using a different set of bindings is basically the difference.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of other like libraries, so are there game libraries in other languages that are drawing your attention?
So Amethyst and Rust is the one that is like I've got my eye on. I also have used Phaser in JavaScript. I kind of pick up anything that is the Pygame level of game libraries. I often
can you explain what does Pygame level mean?
Okay, there's actually a really cool website that Jamie, my co-maintainer, set to called Python Gaming Rocks. It's pythongaming.rocks. That kind of covers this. Not in detail. It is kind of a summary page, but to explain the idea, that in Python we have 3 or 4 layers of game libraries. You have game libraries like Misbehave, which are end user like utility libraries. They're doing a very specific thing, but don't interact with the hardware at all. On the other end of it, you've got things more like Pygame that are really just fancy wrappers around a low-level hardware library. And this is things like Kivy kind of does this, Piglet does this, anything that is about interacting directly, usually through a low-level or a C-style interface. And then you have things in the middle where you've got like things like PPB or Sina, which both of those are really just wrappers around one of these low-level libraries with a slightly different interface. So PPB lives in that middle zone where describing it as high or low level is a little weird, but PPB is just, we don't do any of the low-level programming. That we are not C extensions. It's all pure Python. Versus something, again, like Pygame, where you're getting like direct access to like SDL surfaces and other concepts that are there.
Okay, and also the name of the library in Rust was again?
Amethyst?
Amethyst, check that out. So one last question. What has been the biggest challenges maintaining your projects?
Oh, wow. Honestly, when I started PPB, I was just barely hitting the point of like a mid-level developer. So I've had to learn like all of the team management and the being able to like get a team to gel together and make things happen in a way that is effective. So that's really like the biggest challenge, is just learning those interpersonal skills and those leadership skills that I just didn't have before.
Yeah, I mean, like, software is not a technical problem. It's a communication problem. Like, we say that all the time, and it's like definitely true. But this has been great. Do you have any words of wisdom or calls to action for your community?
I mean, I would love if y'all come join the PPB Discord and chat with us. The more users we have, the better we can like make these APIs faster.
And that website is, again, for your PPB?
ppb.dev.
Awesome. Well, can we give Piper another round of applause in the chat? Thanks so much, Piper. And we'll get you back to talk about misbehave.
Sounds good.
All right, take care. So that was, let me just get this. Thanks, Joe. That was Piper Thunstrom talking about PursuedPyBear and their principles behind how they approach developing that library. Next up, I am going to bring on Sree onto our live stream. Hey, Sree, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from sunny California. It's pretty nice here.
Yeah, I see the Chicago motif behind you. But yeah, you're originally from Chicago, right?
I'm originally from Chicago, so I moved here last year, and I get a little homesick because I have to put up Chicago stuff.
Awesome. Well, you're representing Chicago on this live stream. So can you introduce yourself to our community?
Yeah. So hi, I'm Sree. My pronouns are she and her. I'm currently a full stack developer at a startup in the Bay Area. Yeah, and I'm originally from Chicago. You can hear it in my accent. I have a very Chicago accent.
Yeah, I hear the Chicago and I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
So I know like you're not doing, like you weren't doing Python full time. So can you talk a little bit about like, how you first got into programming?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I got introduced into coding when I was in college. Actually, I'd never been exposed to it before, but I thought it was really fun, and I ended up doing it for my career. I think I was first introduced to Python when I like made a really quick Sudoku solver app for like a college class, and then kind of like reintroduced it again when I started doing like advent of code stuff with ChiPy.
Yeah, advent of code. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love advent of code. I love talking about it. So it's like this advent calendar of coding challenges, like in the holiday in December. So we have like a ChiPy board for that leaderboard. So it's like 1-a-day challenges, and they're pretty. Some of them are pretty challenging, but like the first ones are pretty easy. So it's a good way to pick up a new language. So I was actually trying to like pick up Python again through it.
Yeah, and it's been great having you participate. And I will say I am not the greatest at it, but it's like it always spurs me on when I see people solving them. It's like if they can do it, I should be able to do it too, right?
Yeah, it's really cool to like just see different approaches to it as well. And it's the actual challenge is language agnostic, so you can solve it in any language. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite language?
A favorite language? Yeah. So I probably wouldn't do this professionally, but I do really like assembly languages, like really low level languages. I feel like there's no magic and you kind of like know everything that's happening. So I think that's pretty cool.
I mean, when you're not playing with registers, like are you even really programming? But of course you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like you've moved to a new city. You're also dealing with the effects of sheltering in place, like in this city that you're not familiar with. Can you talk a little bit about like how you've been dealing with that?
Yeah. So I have like ups and downs with it a lot. Like right now I have like reminders on my phone to like drink water and unclench my jaw. But it's been really nice actually to be able to have like these virtual communities. Like I don't know that I would be able to like go to these meetups if they weren't virtual. So that's kind of been like a nice way to sort of like hold space for like people during this pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. Like I know you've been like you were one of the organizers of our Algo Sig before you moved, but you've been able to join us for the past few meetings. How have you enjoyed those events?
Yeah, I enjoy it a lot. I mean, it's nice to like keep your skills pretty sharp, and I really like discussing problems with people. And it just like it's really nice to see everyone's face too. So that's been fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to give it another plug. It's going to be on the first Thursday of every month, meetup.com/_ChiPy_. Very easy to remember. All right, so are you ready to get started with your talk?
Yeah. Let me share my screen. Cool.
All right, Sree, please take it away.
Yeah, so what the heck's a pixel and the California Consumer Privacy Act? So this talk is about the California Consumer Privacy Act, also referred to as the CCPA. And even though it's only applicable to residents of California, it's a major step in comprehensive data privacy legislation in the US. And even some other states are starting to follow suit, including Illinois with the Data Transparency Privacy Act. So I wanted to give context on what the CCPA is and what we can expect of it as consumers, or like if you work at a company that might have to be compliant with it. So hi again, I'm Sree, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm a software engineer. So everything I say in this talk is my understanding of the CCPA. So before you go forth and decide to do any implementation for compliance, like please talk to an actual lawyer. Just to reiterate, not a lawyer. So seriously, what's a pixel? I don't have a ton to say about pixels. I mostly just wanted to add this meme. One of the first asks I got for meeting CCPA compliance at my company was to remove some pixels used for ad tracking. And I was like, okay, what's a pixel? Which is very reassuring to hear. But yeah, so some of you may already know what a pixel is, especially if you've worked in marketing or advertisement. So in this context, it's not a pixel in the traditional sense. It's actually a snippet of code used for conversion tracking. So it's a way for companies to get some information on how their ads are performing. So for example, Facebook has a tool called Facebook Pixel. And historically, it's called a pixel because of the practice of sending an email with like a 1x1 pixel image, which notifies the server that the email has been opened when the image is loaded. So what is the CCPA? So it stands for the California Consumer Privacy Act. And it was signed in 2018, but it actually went into effect at the beginning of this year. And it's really similar to the European, well, not really similar, but it's similar to the European Union's GDPR, if you're familiar with that. It's a little less strict in some cases, though. And then before I go into the actual legislation itself, I'm going to be using terms like data and cell. So data refers to personal information, which is pretty broadly defined in the CCPA. But essentially, it's anything reasonably identifiable like name, address, education, or even biometric information. And this doesn't include public data or data that has been aggregated. So those things aren't regulated under the CCPA. And then cell refers to the sharing of the data by a business to a third party for value. So it may not necessarily be monetary, but it would be for some value consideration. And now I'm just going to go over like some high-level points of the CCPA. There's not that many, don't worry. So first one is right to know. So consumers have the right to know what data is being collected on them, how it's being used, and to whom it's being disclosed. And the bill uses terms like categories and specific pieces of data. So like categories of sources, categories of third parties. And examples of this would be like site analytics and advertising. And then this next one is right to delete. So consumers have a right to request deletion of personal information and would require the business to delete upon receipt of a verified request. And then, so this second part, because of existing laws and regulations, some businesses are required to retain certain information. If it's a financial business, it might be required to retain data by the FCRA or the Fair Credit Reporting Act, or the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act of the CRA. And this is for detecting things like fraud or because the data is required to complete a transaction. And then sort of along the lines of the previous two, the business is required to provide the consumer with the ability and information on how to make a request. And they're required to fulfill requests within 45 days, but are not required to fulfill more than 2 requests in a year. So the CCPA isn't applicable to all businesses, but you can usually find it in the business's privacy policy on their website. And then this last one, so I kind of combined these 2 points. So the first point is that businesses should allow consumers a method to opt out of the sale. And the second point is that they cannot discriminate against the consumer for deciding to opt out. So a business couldn't charge a consumer who opts out like a different price or provide a different quality of good or service, with the exception that that difference is reasonably related to the value provided by the consumer's data. So for example, say you're a bank that provides loan offers, maybe at a flat rate, but then you can also use like a third-party vendor to calculate rate based on personal information. So if a consumer decides to opt out of sharing that data, with a third party, then the bank couldn't increase interest or provide like a higher rate or something solely based on that decision. And like maybe the rate would have been lower, but we wouldn't know that without the consumer's data. So how does this affect us as consumers? Like, why do we care? So it gives us a better understanding and more control, maybe not full control, over what information is stored and used by organizations. And then how does this affect us as businesses? So not all businesses are required to be compliant with the CCPA. There's some eligibility criteria around like revenue and number of consumers or customers that are Californians. But if your company is required or wants to be compliant, there's a good motivation for doing so besides like obviously trying to avoid fines for violations. So for one, it gives businesses the opportunity to be more transparent with their users and how they're using their data, which in turn gives them the ability to increase trust and reliability in their brand and in their products. And according to a study on consumer data collection, 2/3 of US consumers are very likely to share their data if the data collector is clear about why their data is needed and how it'll be used. And 64% of Americans are more likely to share their data if the data collector is trusted and reliable. So there's a good incentive to be mindful about how we retain and share data. So besides trying to figure out what a pixel was, I ran into a few challenges kind of working on this project, mostly around inventory and ownership. So there's a lot of overlap in what data we protect from like a data engineering, InfoSec, legal perspective, but there's a lot of differences in how we define that data between departments, which is in turn kind of challenging to then have to consolidate that under the definitions of data in the CCPA. So it's definitely really helpful to take inventory on what all data is eligible under the CCPA regulation and then classify those assets. Another challenge is kind of like around ownership, like do we delete a pixel, which is something I would do as an engineer, or do we get an addendum to clarify on the terms and restrictions, which is something the legal team would do. Another kind of ownership challenge was related to fulfilling the requests. So while we eventually wanted to automate this process, we also wanted to make sure that we were fulfilling verifiable requests, because like we definitely don't want to send all of one person's data to the wrong person. So as we were rolling out this feature, it made sense for us to sort of integrate these verification checks into like our operations process, like our customer support team. So while the actual work here was done independently, we had all been meeting pretty regularly for design and status updates to try to reduce any disconnects between departments. So this may not be applicable now, but it's definitely something to think about for future data protection legislation. So states like Nevada, New York, and Illinois have already amended or proposed legislation to protect consumer data, very similar to the CCPA. And speaking of future data protection legislation, what are some things we can expect to see in prospective data privacy policy? So there are more proposed amendments on the ballot that may go into effect next year, which does include harsher punishments for CCPA violators. So businesses should be held accountable when they violate consumers' privacy rights, and the penalties should be higher when the violation affects children. I mentioned earlier that the term personal information is broadly defined, so you could also expect to see more clarifications on definitions as well. Businesses will have to disclose the length of time the data is retained. Businesses will be required to take reasonable steps to ensure the data collected is accurate. And then businesses will have to disclose if the data is used to advance a business's political purposes. And that's it. That's actually all I have. So I posted some resources on the right here. The first one's just a link to the CCPA at california.gov. The second one's actually the Data Transparency Privacy Act, which is the Illinois one, Senate Bill 2230, which you can find on the Illinois General Assembly site. The third one is just an article about the benefits of data transparency. And then this last one is actually a new digital security group at ChiPy. So it's just a space to build and share digital security knowledge. And I think they meet every other Tuesday, but you can find that information on their website. And if you want to reach out, please do them on the ChiPy Slack at Sree. And if you're not on the ChiPy Slack, I'm also on Twitter at Prasad.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sree. Can we please give Sree a round of applause in the chat? This time I'm prepared with a copy and paste. Oh, that was great. And also, I think more speakers should put their ChiPy Slack handles on their slides. Like speakers all over, like, I'm going to do this starting now for every talk I ever give. I think it's great. We did have some questions come in. Joe was wondering, he's a software developer. So what steps can he take, or as a software developer, what can we do to make sure that we're in compliance with the CCPA and similar legislation?
That's a good question. Definitely talk to your legal team. I had to talk to them a lot to make sure that I was understanding the policy a lot. I've like read through the legislation so many times and it's still like, I'm not totally clear what they're all saying here. But yeah, I mean, just bringing it up and then just being aware and then just kind of trying to integrate being conscious of like your users' data and security, just like while you're developing.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit more about like I know where I work, like when like December 31st was coming around, we're like, okay, we got to get this verbiage on our website. We're going to have this like manual process. As we learn how to go about deleting data, we're going to automate that process more and more. Can you talk a little bit about the process that your company took implementing these procedures?
Yeah. So our team was like pretty small. So we kind of prioritized the right to access first. So we wanted to make sure that we gave our users a way to be able to submit these requests. And we actually released it a little bit earlier than the December 31st. I think we maybe got like 2 requests. But yeah, so we wanted to prioritize that. And then, and then we kind of like sort of took steps, like slower steps to make sure that we can automate it. Because the priority here was just like making sure that we were compliant and making sure that we were prioritizing our users.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about like, you can't believe in data privacy unless you actually take these actions. We had a question come in from Michael. How quickly do you need to become CCPA compliant if you fall into eligibility from an influx of users from California?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, there's like the eligibility for CCPA. I think it's like something like 50,000 California residents or something, or customers, and then like revenue of over 25 million. And then I think nonprofits are not eligible, and then maybe some government things. But that's actually very similar to what's in the Illinois Data Transparency Privacy Act. So it's already in effect. So if you're not compliant, like from the beginning of the year, there might be some like possible violation, fine things. But yeah, if you can like throw up like a form or like a venue for users to make these requests, then they don't have to be fulfilled for 45 days.
So we did get a question. I know you are not a lawyer. We have to like state that as many times as possible. But do you have any advice for a small 3-person company?
I don't think like small companies are eligible for CCPA. I don't know if that's something that's going to come up in the amendment, but it's usually for like bigger companies that make money off of like users' data. So I think like small startups and like nonprofits, they don't have to worry about that right now.
I would just say that if you have users, be careful about their privacy. Like that's just
in general, yeah.
Yeah, just be good about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Treat people like the way we want your data to be treated. Because if you don't, like, would you ever want to sign up for your own service?
Yeah.
Before we do let you go, and I also want to stress you are not a lawyer. Do you have any like words of wisdom or action items for the community?
Yeah. Care about your users. Try to look out for them. They trust you. And take care of yourself. Check in with your friends and family. Check in with me. Send me memes. I always appreciate those. And yeah.
Okay, I will be sending you memes. Thanks for letting me know.
Okay, good.
All right, well, thanks so much, Sree. We'll see you around.
Great, thanks.
All right, so we just had Sree Prasad talking about the CCPA, which I believe is the California Consumer Privacy Act. You have to be in compliance at the start of the year if you are pretty much selling customer data in your large company. A lot of interesting stuff if you're doing web development. Stuff like this comes up all the time. We are going to take a short break before we come back. But if you are enjoying this talk and you are liking like everything red, including like my cup, go down there and hit that like button. It really helps us out. And if you haven't subscribed already, hit that button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, and you'll get notified of upcoming events. We'll see you in 5 minutes. All right, and we're back. I also got my YouTube lights. It wouldn't really be the same. Thanks for joining us at the ChiPy main meeting. We just had two fantastic talks. One talk about PursuedPyBear by Piper Thunstrom, and the last talk was by Sree Prasad about the California Consumer Privacy Act. There's been a lot of great discussion about this act being a good thing and more people thinking that it's going to go around the country. I really hope it does. Consumer privacy is very important, especially since data is currency these days. I do just want to give a shout out before we go to our next speaker to our new sponsor, JFrog. If you go to that link, they are giving away shirts and you get a chance to win a Nintendo Switch. They're pretty much impossible to find, so I think this might be pretty much the only way you can get one. So check them out, bit.ly/ChiPyJFrog. All right, next up, I'm going to be bringing on Nina Zakharenko to the stream. Hey, Nina, how's it going? Welcome to Chicago Python.
Hey, how's it going?
We're doing great. Where are you calling in from?
Also sunny California.
Fantastic. I feel like California is the place to be. Sort of have my accent from California too.
Yeah, I grew up in New York and I just keep moving west. I'm like, this isn't west enough and this isn't west enough. And now there's no further west to go. So,
well, it could be Alaska or Hawaii.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. Can you introduce yourself to our community?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So my name is Nina Zakharenko. I am currently a developer advocate focusing on Python at Microsoft, although before that I was a developer for many years. I do lots of things. You might have seen me speak before. And I'm also a recently elected board member of the PSF.
Fantastic. Congrats on your recent election.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm still kind of shocked.
Yeah, it's I'm sure with like all those meetings and subcommittees, it's much take up a lot of your time.
Yeah, it's not so bad. I think the ramping up is the worst part of it. You know, getting all my calendars in order, and there's a lot of emails that come in and Slacks, and so it's just kind of keeping up to date with a whole new slew of communication channels.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we appreciate all you do for the community.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about how you first got into Python?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This PyCon, if it did happen in person, I think would have been my 7th or my 8th. So I've been at it for a little bit of time now. This is maybe something not a lot of folks know about me, but I was a Java developer for a long time. And at some point I realized that the kind of roles that I was getting being a Java developer were not like very fun or exciting. I was working in finance. I'm like, all right, what are all the cool kids doing? And I settled on Python. And at the time I was working in a role that was mostly Java, but I started using Python for scripting. And we had the opportunity to go to a conference a year. So I picked PyCon because I heard it was cool. And then that kind of led to a snowball of things, including me quitting my job. So good decision for me. Maybe not the best decision for the company to send me to PyCon.
Is there anything about Java that you miss?
No.
I hear that a lot, so it's definitely okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I really like about Java is sort of just it's like it's got that structure and like everybody's using like all these design patterns. They might be using them too much, but I sort of enjoy that aspect a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes working in a strongly typed language is nice, but I'm sure Java has changed a lot in the years since I've used it.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, lots of bean factories and just like super verbose. Yeah.
Yeah, you see those names that take up the 80 characters. It'd be like, would it be how many characters? I can't even imagine they'd be linting.
There's no character limit. You just you let it all go.
Yeah. So we've been dealing a lot with the effects of sheltering in place. Like the thing that's been keeping me sane has been Chicago Python and this live stream. How have you been dealing with the effects of COVID-19 in the pandemic?
I have like good days and bad days, I would say. There are definitely days that where I just have a lot of existential dread. Like the last time I met with my mentor, I was just like melting down. Like, how do we come out of this? But Yeah, I don't know. I feel like March and April were pretty bad, and now I'm kind of getting used to spending a lot of time indoors. Like where I live, there are a lot of tourists, and so I don't really go anywhere on the weekends. Sometimes I can get away with sneaking away somewhere on like a weekday when there's less people, but I'm getting used to it, and I don't like that I'm getting used to it. Like I feel like that's bad. But yeah, all the things I've had random anxiety about, they're suddenly true, and some I kind of feel a little validated, but
Yeah, it's you gotta take it as it comes. I don't know if you've heard of the site eternalmarch.com.
No, what is it?
So it's just like every day it updates. So right now, today is March 166th. So every day I just log on and think about the day that's yet to come. But yeah, take it one day at a time. Really nothing else you can do.
Oh, I'm gonna have to check this out. I can't find it by Googling, so maybe
I will definitely ping you after with the website.
Yeah, like there are lots of times where I like don't know what month it is or what day, occasionally what year. So
yeah, it's the longest year of my life for sure. But yeah, changing gears a little bit. Are you ready to get started with your talk?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So like you mentioned, I gave this talk at well, not at, but for PyCon. I gave a recorded version. So I do link out to the slides and like a video of that talk if folks want to watch it later or share it. Yeah, or watch it here, right?
Yeah,
we'll
watch it here.
The recording after.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Let's get started. There we go. Can you see my slides?
Yeah, you're up. Please take it away.
Sounds good. And I have about 25 minutes.
Oh yeah, take as much time as you need.
All right, 2-hour talk. Got it.
Yeah, let's do it. We can, if you want to do some live coding, we can definitely make that happen.
Yeah. Let's have a marathon. All right, cool. So hey, Chicago Python. It's good to be able to chat with you virtually today. I have attended a Chicago Python meetup in person many moons ago. I don't even remember what year that was. So it's good to be back. So usually when I give this talk live, I've asked for a show of hands in the room for the question that I'm about to ask, but you all can feel free to share your thoughts in chat. And I will say that this is a no judgment zone. So don't be embarrassed. There's no right or wrong answer. So when you run into a bug in your Python code that needs investigating, how many of you use print to debug your code? Well, if you do, you're in the right place. You will learn something new today. And then how many of you use PDB or maybe IPDB or maybe even the debugger in your IDE? Probably less. When I gave this talk for the first time in person, I thought, that maybe it would be a 50-50 split, but it was more like 80 or 90% of developers in the room used print and maybe only 10 to 20% used debugging. So when I'm done with the presentation, I'm going to take a look at chat and see if it's about the same split. So today I'm going to talk to you about all the benefits of using a debugger when you're programming in Python. I'm going to show you a few different types of debuggers that you can use. And hopefully you'll learn something new in this talk. The slides, the video is available at the link nina.2/PyCon2020. There's lots of additional resources and links throughout. Just know that if you want to follow the links, you're going to have to download the slides. The links don't work when they're embedded on the web. Cool. And who am I? Heard a little bit about me before. Work at Microsoft as a Python developer advocate. I really try to focus on making Azure and VS Code better to use for Python devs everywhere. But I've written software at lots of places and I've worked on lots of projects, big and small. If you want to stay in touch, you can follow me on Twitter at NNJA. Sometimes I do live coding on Twitch at NNJAIO. I've also been running a weekly interview with the Python Community Friday at 10 a.m. called Python Tea. This week's Python Tea is tomorrow with Lucas Longa. So please tune in if you would like. And you can also find me on the web. So what are we going to learn today? I'm going to cover why use debuggers, breakpoints, and some other debugger fundamentals. I'm going to talk about my workflow and the tools that I use, like PDB, IPDB, and IDEs. We're going to talk about breakpoint in Python 3.7, and I'll show you some demos and tips and tricks on when you might want to use what. Now, a quick disclaimer here, this is my way. There are many tools and workflows available for debugging. I'm just going to show you the one that I use, and that doesn't mean it's the right one. Choose what works best for you. So here I have a little demo application. And this is always a little bit tricky with me sharing my screen, so be a little bit patient with me, please. It's a very simple Flask app. There's no data store. I'm just hitting the GitHub search API, looking for popular libraries by star based on the language that is selected here. There we go. And the API data comes back as JSON, which is pretty standard stuff. Now, this is the meat of the code. There's a repo, repos with most stars method. Here I am calling the GitHub API with some parameters that I have set up that detail the search query. And then I get back some JSON, and then I do something with those items. So how would I go debugging my little application if I was just using print? Well, I would go into VS Code, and maybe I would throw a print statement here, like just to see what my items look like, and then kind of go from there. So with my Flask app running, let's submit this. And if I go back into my terminal, I'll see that it printed out all this stuff. It's hard to read and it's not useful. And I would probably go through a few iterations of this, trying to figure out exactly what to print that would help me figure out my bug. So print is not so fun, and working with JSON can be especially annoying because sometimes the data doesn't actually look how you expect it to. And yeah, that's a face I find myself making when I am print debugging. So if you're already using prints, though, you might be wondering, like, well, what is the point of using debuggers at all? You already know how to do a thing. Why invest time in learning something else? Well, the problem with print is that it doesn't really give us a lot of context. So if you've put prints in your code, you're familiar with the process of tweaking the print because you got it wrong. When you're working with these large nested data structures, you're tweaking it, you're rerunning your code, you're tweaking your formatting, you're rerunning it again, and it's super tedious. And this has happened to me more times than I would like to admit, because sometimes the bug is in your print statement. Like, you're printing out the wrong thing completely. Okay, so let's look at debugging. And here I'm using a Python 3.7, should be using Python 3.8 virtual environment, but I believe anything past Python 3.3 or 3.4, you now gain access to a built-in breakpoint method. So all I have to do is add a breakpoint right here and save, and then let's rerun our Flask server. And then down here, I'm just going to curl localhost so I don't have to keep opening my browser and loading the page. This basically does the same thing, just programmatically. Cool. Now when I do that, I will see where I was running my Flask app, this little arrow here, and it's pointing at the line of code that is just after where I set my breakpoint. So I can hit L here, which gives me a little bit of context around what line I'm on. And you'll see my cursor blinking, or my prompt blinking rather. This is a terminal. I can type in it, and I can interact with the objects that are in this code space. So I can take a look at the length of my items. I got 30 responses back. I can get back like one item and interact with it a little bit. Like maybe I want to know what the keys are, so I can just print that out. I can pretty print it. Okay, and that's like already looking a lot better than my garbled mess of a print, because chances are I forgot about pretty print the first time I wanted to print this out. And then there's also an interact command, which drops me into a prompt that looks a lot like the Python prompt. You'll see it changed to 3 arrows, and that's because it basically is. It's a full-fledged prompt where I can now enter multi-line commands. So I can say like for item and items, and let's say I want to look at the last 3 of them, print out, let's say like the URL of the project. Cool. So I can interact with my data structure pretty easily. To exit interact mode, I will hit Control D, and then I can either hit N for next to kind of keep scrolling through my code, or C to continue, or Q to quit the debugger. And we'll talk about what all of those stand for in a little bit. And you'll see that my curl here returns the HTML that I would have seen if I loaded the page. All right, so this is a little bit better than print, right? And adding a debugger statement really wasn't all that hard. I just had to use the breakpoint built in, and I'll talk a little bit about how to do this for non-Python 3.7. So using a debugger, you can really easily explore the state of a running program. You can write new snippets of code and experiment to your heart's content. A lot of times you can even save those snippets and add them to your code, which is a workflow that I personally really like. And I feel like people who are starting out in Python are kind of afraid of using debuggers because it seems like there's too much overhead, and using print is really familiar. But I kind of hope to show you that there's nothing to be afraid of. Like, you can get started with debuggers in no time at all, and it's really going to supercharge the way that you write your code. And you might not necessarily have to clean up prints that are littered all over your code to examine the state of multiple objects. Cool. So with a debugger, you're using a tool that is made for the job because it drops you into the point of execution, and that allows you not to see just the string representation of what you're trying to examine, but you can actually call it and examine the arguments to a function, look at other values and variables that are in scope, and a lot more. So I found that this really increased my productivity as a programmer. You can increase yours too. So there are a few debugger fundamentals that you have to know about. The foundation of debugging is the breakpoint. And you can kind of think of a breakpoint like a trap. So you're walking along, you're executing code line by line, and then you trip on something and you need to stop. That's the breakpoint. It stops the flow of execution in your program. And there are different types of debuggers. You saw a quick demo earlier of command line debugging. PDB is included in the standard option library, and it's a great option. It's portable. You don't need to install anything else. But I tend to use something called IPDB, which is what I'll be demoing in a few minutes. You can install it via pip, but there are lots and lots of other options. So if you're using Python 3.7, you can use breakpoint. Sorry, my bad. I said breakpoint was introduced in Python 3.3 or 3.4. I was pretty sure it was introduced in Python 3.7. So ignore what I said earlier and pay attention to what I said just now. So the breakpoint advantages are that you can set your debugger of choice with a environment variable. I like IPDB, which offers a lot of the features of IPython, such as syntax highlighting, there's better tab complete, and a lot more. And it's really easy to change this out if you feel like it, which is a pretty great reason for upgrading. So all you would need to do is set the Python breakpoint environment variable. There's another nice advantage here is you can set another environment variable, Python breakpoint, to 0 to easily skip any breakpoints at execution. And I will talk about why that's important a little bit later on. If you're not using Python 3.7, you can add breakpoints directly to your code, or you can set them interactively. I usually do option 1 more so than option 2. but there are pros and cons to each approach. Option 1 is a little bit harder to disable. You're kind of leaving stuff in your code just like you might with print. With option 2, if your code moves around, your breakpoint line numbers might change. So, pick what works best for you. You can learn a lot more about the tools as you use it, but there's really only a handful of commands that you need to know about to be productive in the debugger. One is L for list or LL for long list, and that's going to print out the code surrounding the breakpoint that was hit. N is go to the next line. S is step into. So if your debugger breakpoint is on a function that could be called, do you actually want to jump or step into that function to examine how it's being executed, or do you just care about the return value? C is continue until the next breakpoint or until the program is done executing. And then most importantly, there's H for help with an optional command if you forget the other 4. So I just want to show you a bit more of command line debugging with IPDB. So I'm going to quit my server here and set my Python breakpoint environment variable here and run Flask again. Notice that I set Python breakpoint to ipdb.setTrace. Cool. And I'm going to use curl to hit the server again. All right, so now when I come back here, we'll see some fanciness. First off, there is syntax highlighting, so that makes this a lot easier to read. I can do L again to kind of add a little bit more context around where in the code I am. And I'm just going to do C to continue. I actually want to move my breakpoint somewhere else. And also, I think my camera just died. So
yeah, it says something about like it was a little too hot. It needs to cool.
Weird. It's been on all day. Well, it is kind of toasty. Maybe
we
my
can still see your screen, so you're definitely okay.
All right, let's see if I can get this to work again. There we go. Let's see if it stays on.
Okay.
Cool. So let's move the breakpoint somewhere else. I want to move it up here right before I call the create query method. And let's restart the server just in case. Cool. So now if I do L, we'll see that right now I'm on this line that is about to call this create query method. I can do S to step into this method call. And if I do L to look around, we'll see that I'm now at the top of create query. I can hit N to go to the next line. And something that I run into all the time is like trying to examine query at line 18. How many of you folks think this is gonna work? Maybe yes, no, maybe so. It doesn't. I get an error saying that query is not defined, and that's because as of line 18, this variable is in fact not defined. So I have to press N one more time and go to line 19 in order to examine my query object here. A few other useful commands. A will show me the args that were passed or arguments that were passed into this method. So I could see what languages were passed in and the number of stars. I can do R to jump to the return, which in this case is line 20. So not particularly useful in this scenario, but if you're working with complex code that has lots of return statements and you're not sure which one is getting called, that is particularly useful. And then I'm going to do N to continue with this method. And I want to show off let's go to where we get our items. So now we got our items back from the API. I'm going to grab one again. And I want to show off some nice features of IPython and IPDB. One is tab complete, like I mentioned. So let's say I wanted to get the number of stars for this repo, and I didn't remember what this API, what this key was called. I can type in star and hit tab here, and it will show me all of the options that start with star. So let's get the stargazers count, and I can finish that out, and there we go. That's for, let's see. Oh, that's why that's not working. I was doing the plural. There we go. And that's for the free code camp repo. So overall, a much nicer experience than PDB, but again, you have to install a third-party package. If you can't remember all of those commands, because who can? Come on, slides. There we go. I made a handy cheat sheet here that you can use to be productive. And I will say that, you know, use the basic commands and then add others on as you need them. You don't need to learn these all at once. And if you do need a cheat sheet, for those of you who have noticed, my cheat sheet matches my hair, which I'm pretty happy about. If you're not comfortable on the CLI or you prefer graphical tools, there are still plenty available. I'm going to be showing you VS Code, which is the IDE that I use for my daily editor, but there are also lots of other options available like PyCharm or PUDB, which is a graphical CLI. So if you want to get debugging with VS Code, you'll have to download it and install the Python extension, and then create a debugger configuration, which is pretty easy to do. You'll just get a useful pop-up if you don't have one already the first time you try to debug. And if you download these slides, these are all links. And then when you are running the debugger in the IDE, you'll see some visual icons that represent what we were doing earlier. So the play icon is kind of like continue, and the little arrow that jumps over is next. The down arrow is step, and the up arrow moves up in the stack, and then you can reset or stop the debugger. So how do we debug with an IDE? Let me kill this server here so I don't get any conflicts. I'm going to clean up the breakpoint call that I had before. And to set breakpoints, oh, sorry about the siren. It's so loud. All right. To set breakpoints, you click to the left of what is called the gutter, which is where the line numbers appear. So I'm going to set a breakpoint right here, and we'll see that it is red. And if I go to my debugger here, I just have to hit this button because I already went through and made my debugger configuration. Cool. We'll see that I know that the debugger is running because the bottom bar in VS Code has changed colors. And I'm going to click on this URL, which opened a new tab that you can't see, but it's spinning in the background. And now there's a yellow line and an arrow indicating that my breakpoint was hit. Some of the nice options of debugging in VS Code is I can now, sorry, my mouse is acting up, but I can now mouse over some of these variables and see the value right there, which is really nice. So let's say that I wanted to interact with this from the command line. There is a debug console here. So currently my languages are Python, Java, Script, Ruby, and Java, but I can kind of change it right here to let's say Go. And because I did that before calling this create query method, when I jump over and I look at my query, we see that the language has been overwritten. So now if I play and show you what has loaded, we'll see that this is just Go languages. So the debug console is really nice. There's tab completion here, just like you saw with IPython. One of my other favorite features of debugging in VS Code is, let me open the debug tab right here. You can see that it's this icon with a little bug on it, so it's pretty easy to find. And I'm going to look at my breakpoints here, and there is one that I want to check. So let me go to the browser and reload this, which should trigger my breakpoint. And now you'll see that I have a breakpoint triggered right in the template itself. For those of you who have written templates, you know how nice this is. Like I can now mouse over here and see what language is selected and what variables are available in my template, which is great. There is one other thing that I wanted to show you that I think is really cool. And the stuff that I'm clicking here on the left-hand side, this allows me to just check and uncheck my breakpoints pretty quickly. I don't have to write stuff in my code. So now my active breakpoint is here after I set my items. So I'm just going to go back and reload this page, which triggers my breakpoint. Something that's really cool about VS Code is I can go back to before where I set my query. Like now we've completed this path of execution. We've called the GitHub API and everything like that. But I can right click at query here and go to, where is it? Jump to cursor. And this will like rewind the execution. So now I didn't have to go to my website. I didn't have to click on anything to like reset up the scenario. And now I can go to my debug console and change my languages again. Let's say I'm going to make them Go and Rust and PHP and hit enter. And now I can just go back and re-execute from that breakpoint, which is super nice. So here we go. Here are my results with Go, Rust, and PHP. Cool. So there are a lot of options. When might you want to use what? How do you know what you want to use? Well, I rarely use PDB from the standard library. The functionality is just way too limited. But it's good to know about, like if you're working on a machine where you can't install additional dependencies. So my preferences are for most small programs and scripts. I use IPDB because I want to work from the command line. But I tend to reach for IDE debugging when my code base gets complex or I need to dive in and debug templates. So choose the strategy that works best for you. There are a few tips and tricks that I wanted to share with you. There's a really simple one, and this took me a long time to figure out. I've spent a lot of time in the debugger entering like N for next or pressing enter. You can use the graphical debugger to just set a new breakpoint and continue onwards. The other one is if you know how important tests are and you ever get stuck figuring out why a test is failing, you can just throw a breakpoint in that unit test, which is something I do all the time, and it's really handy. There's also a cool hack. So with this little, the snippet of code, if you put this in a file called a .pdbrc file, I showed you interact earlier. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to show you this, but this little snippet will enable you to enter an IPython interpreter when you enter interact I into your CLI debugger. So it has all the fancy stuff that you can do in IPython, like the syntax highlighting and some magic methods that let you paste stuff in. If you don't really know much about IPython, don't worry about this, but I know it will make a handful of people very, very excited. And when you debug in Jupyter Notebooks, when you debug in VS Code, you can also debug Jupyter Notebooks, which is extra exciting for those of you who might be data scientists. There are a few gotchas that you want to be aware of. You really don't want to leave breakpoints in your production code, because if you have things misconfigured, you could halt your whole running program, and you don't want to be responsible for that. So if you're using Python 3.7 and breakpoints, you can set an environment variable to prevent that, but it's still best practice to never commit code with breakpoints in it at all. And in order to do that, you can use a plugin called get pre-commit hooks, which will prevent commits that match certain conditions. You can check out this library at pre-commit.com. It includes a pre-written debug-statement hooks, which checks for PDB, IPDB, breakpoint, and a lot more. It's really nice to use something like this because you kind of future-proof as the Python language grows. Maybe there's more popular debuggers. And this using a pre-commit hook will also allow you to run a linter. You can check for running trailing white space, any unused imports that might have made it into your code before they actually get committed. So to wrap up, and by now you should have a pretty basic understanding of how debugging works in Python. If you do have any questions, you can kind of start asking them in chat. And you should also have a pretty good understanding of what tools are available, from PDB and the standard library to graphical debuggers and IDEs. And I just want to say that fixing bugs is a process of confirming one by one that the things that you believe to be true about the code are actually true. And when you find an assumption that isn't, you found a clue to where the bug might be. And using a debugger in your software is a way of supercharging your productivity because it allows you to sniff out those bugs. And hopefully I've really given you the confidence to allow you to say goodbye to print and hello to the debugger. Thank you all so much for tuning in. You can download the slides at nino.2/PyCon2020. I linked to a few additional resources at the end. You can find me on Twitter at NNJA or on Twitch at NNJAIO. And if you want to check out Python at Microsoft, the link is below as well. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thanks so much, Nina. Can we please give Nina a round of applause in the chat? Oh, that was fantastic. A lot of great comments about how people are really excited about using IPDB. Yeah, like just tab completion totally is going to change your life. Can't recommend it enough. We did get a question in from Joe Jasinski. How can you start debugging with VS Code when your code is running inside of a Docker container?
There is like a remote attach available. I don't really use that workflow, so I'm not familiar with the mechanics of it, but it is certainly possible.
Do you have any like resources that like we can like just like what we can Google to maybe find that?
Yeah. Let's see. I don't actually have YouTube open, so I will paste it into this private chat, and then you can.
Yeah, I can definitely. I can pass that along. Yeah, this is definitely going to help me out as well. You did allude to this a little bit at the end. Can you talk about like your debugging like workflow when you're sort of like finding a problem and you don't know how to solve it? Like, how would you start attacking it? I know this provide clues, but like some like anything else would be very helpful.
I just always throw a breakpoint in there right away. Like I stopped scratching my head like, oh, should I do a print or not? I almost always just throw a breakpoint and start messing with the code. And now a lot of times, like the stuff that I do in my debugger instance, I'll just copy and paste it into the code when I'm done because I kind of figured out what the problem was.
Awesome. And I saw that you were going backwards in time. So was that just like going backwards in the stack, or was that like starting up that same process and going to that same point?
I have no idea how that VS Code magic jump to cursor works. I have no idea how it's implemented, but I don't know of an equivalent function in to be able to do that from the command line. I'm sure that there is because, you know, there's always something, but yeah, it's some secret sauce.
Yeah, it's I just opened my eyes. Like I've been wanting to do that in Python forever. I guess I got to start actually using a graphical debugger.
Yeah.
Also, I think that's it for questions coming in. But before we do let you go, do you have any like words of wisdom or calls to action for our Chicago Python community?
No, just keep doing what you're doing. I'm super honored that y'all decided to invite me, and I'm really glad that I had the chance to participate. And I think now more than ever, it's really important to continue building and maintaining community, especially when it's hard. So y'all are doing great things, and I was really happy to get the chance to talk and hang out.
Thanks so much for coming on. And I will say, like, I love all your talks, and I'm really excited to have you on our live stream.
Well, thanks for the invite. Let's see if my camera works. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. We got it at the end. Perfect.
I can wave y'all off.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much, Nina. We'll see you around.
Bye. See ya.
All right, so that was Nina Zakharenko talking about how to say goodbye to the print statement and say hello to the debugger. From the comments, it looks like it's going to change a lot of people's workflows. So that's about it for us. Let me get my screen shared so we can just wrap it up. I do want to give a shout out to our new silver sponsor, JFrog. If you go to this website, you can fill out their form to get a shirt. And you can also fill it out to enter yourself in for a Nintendo Switch. With the lack of Switches at Best Buy, I think this might be your best bet at getting a full-size one. Where can you find ChiPy? We are on Slack. We have a very active Slack community with almost 2,000 members. If you go to this link, you could send yourself invite, join in conversations about things that are happening both in Chicago as well as the wider Python ecosystem. We're also on Twitter. We're going to be live tweeting these events and just letting people know what's going on in our community. All this information plus more, plus our new jobs board as well as our mentorship site links are available on chipy.org. I do want to make everybody aware of some upcoming events. We're going to be bringing back our Python lunch break on Thursday, August 27th. That's going to be our first one in a few months. It's going to be with Reuven Lerner. He's going to be joining us from Israel. Really excited to see what he has in store. I'll be posting a description hopefully sometime early next week. September 3rd is going to be our next AlgoSig. Our next main meeting is going to be on Thursday, September 10th. We're going to have a talk about a self-driving RC car. Really excited about that. And then September 16th, which is a Wednesday, is going to be our next data sig. We are looking for speakers for some of these events. So if you are interested, please reach out on our website. Also, just another shout out before we go. JFrog, really happy to have you on board. And I'm just going to bring Joe Jasinski. He's been working hard on the live stream. So, hey, Joe, how's it going? Thanks for all you've been doing behind the scenes.
No, you're doing the real magic. So thank you.
No, man, it's all a teamwork, man. We'll see you around, Joe. Thanks. All right. So that's it for us at Chicago Python. We appreciate you joining in for our main meeting. If you have not done so, please like this video. It really helps us out. And if you have not subscribed, make sure you do so you get notified of our upcoming live streams. We have a few in the next month, so looking forward to that. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.